We welcome you to the September 12th, 2022 meeting of the General Obligation Bond Economic Development and Education Subcommittee. I hereby call this meeting to order. We have interpreters today to provide Spanish translation. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Mario Barajas, and together with my colleague Carmen Cota, we're going to be serving as today's Spanish interpreters. I'll now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish audience. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Mario Barajas y junto con mi colega Carmen Cota vamos a estar sirviéndoles como intérpretes del habla hispana. Les pedimos como favor, si es que van a estar dando un comentario público, si pueden hablar lentamente, claramente y evitar distracciones de fondo. Así de esa manera podemos interpretarles de la mejor manera posible. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. There will be a public comment period during item 3 on today's agenda, which will be up to 30 minutes in length. Speakers will have up to 2 minutes to comment. However, prior to the start of the public comment period, I may specify a briefer duration based on the volume of speakers. If you are attending in person and would like to speak, you'll need to sign up to speak at the kiosk located at the entrance to the council chambers before item 3 begins. For virtual participants, registration to speak must be submitted 2 hours prior to the start of each meeting. Speakers will be called in the order received, beginning with virtual participants. Our first agenda item is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, and I think we have a second here as well. Our next agenda item is introductory remarks. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Our next item agenda is introductory remarks. During this meeting, we will be going over follow-up items from our first meeting. The subcommittee has received comments from the public, and members have their own vision of priority capital needs. We will continue to receive more input today. As the subcommittee hears presentations and public comment today, I will ask that members keep in mind we have a limited time to reach our recommendations. We are tasked with identifying a prioritized list of projects to recommend to the executive committee no later than the last scheduled subcommittee meeting. There will not be additional meetings scheduled. As a reminder, the city has not had a general obligation bond program since 2006, and significant infrastructure needs exist that exceed the $500 million scope approved by the city council. The subcommittee should also consider projects a higher priority that would ensure city facilities and infrastructure can continue to be accessible and safe for operation. We have 2 meetings after today to finalize a prioritized list of project recommendations to the executive committee. No later than the 3rd meeting, the subcommittee will need to have a list of projects identified, and no later than the 4th meeting, those projects will need to be ranked in priority order, concluding with a final report to the executive committee. To assist the subcommittee with prioritizing projects, staff has developed a method for facilitating decisions on prioritization and will brief us today on that process following the next agenda item. Finally, the city has scheduled a public hearing for the executive committee on September 14th at 6 p.m. for purposes of engaging the public and to hear comments regarding the overall bond program. I would encourage you all to listen in to that meeting or watch the video posted on the General Obligation Bond website at your earliest convenience so you can hear the feedback received from residents. Due to open meeting law requirements, subcommittee members should not plan to actually attend the meeting. Our next agenda item is for follow-up discussion and public comment regarding capital needs and the discussion of the subcommittee process for prioritizing those capital needs. I will turn the meeting over to staff to respond to questions and requests from the last meeting. At the conclusion of the discussion on capital needs, we will have staff go over possible method of prioritizing projects.
Chairman Reed and subcommittee members, thank you for your presence today. We have at the table for this afternoon's presentation our Community and Economic Development Director, Ms. Christine Mackey. Also with me is our Deputy Director for Budget and Research, Mr. Chris Fazio, and also our attorney, Mr. Thomas Stack. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Mackey to run through the presentation.
To continue the conversation in regards to the Economic Development and Education Subcommittee, a committee's proposal moving forward. Yeah. We're working on technology issues. Hold tight 1 second. There we go. They're moving in well now. As we look at the submission requirements that come in for us, we wanted to highlight the 5 areas just to familiarize you with the submission requirements. For those individuals in our committee and in other committees, we do have community members who are submitting requests outside of staff's recommendations to move forward. So we wanted to walk through with you those submission requirements just to keep in your mind as you think of them. So first, they can't already be covered under the scope of an existing project or program. We need to know, if they can only receive partial funding from the bond program, how would they move forward? Would partial funding be beneficial to them? And if so, they need to show how the other funds would be raised. We must have a complete scope of work and estimated costs, including operating cost impact to the city, if any. We often have funding for one-time costs, but ongoing operation and maintenance means it has to be added into the existing budget. It needs to demonstrate an urgent need, and for our committee, it's in either economic development or education. And it must demonstrate the ability to expend the approved amount within 5 years. This is a 5-year bond program, and the goal would be to get on a regular cadence of bond vote by our citizens every 5 years. As you will remember, at our last subcommittee meeting, technology is not being my favorite friend today. As you will remember at our last subcommittee meeting, staff did go through the prioritized staff items, which we'll go through again with you at the end of the presentation today. However, during your committee meeting, there was new information that was provided by Arizona State University, and the committee did vote to hear this item in full at your next committee meeting, which I'll walk through with you today. Our friends from ASU are here with us in the audience, so if the committee has questions that I or staff up here can't answer, we'll ask them to come up and answer your questions in depth. So as we look at ASU, we all know that it is a comprehensive public research university. I like to joke with Dr. Crow that he made my education more valuable. Of course, when I went there, it was the #1 party school in the country. Not my fault. My right hand, not my fault. But now, of course, it is #1 in innovation across the country. And #2 and #3 are MIT and Stanford, just to give you a flavor as to where they land. ASU is nationally ranked programs, and they develop their graduates that then feed into the workforce here, not only in the city of Phoenix, but the entire state of Arizona. And the city and ASU do have a very long relationship, and we're very fortunate to have them as our partner. In fact, they were a key partner of the revitalization of downtown. I remember when I would come down here for GPEC meetings long before I had the privilege of being the director of this department and working for the city of Phoenix. I'd come down to GPEC for meetings, and I'd get back to the East Valley as quick as I could. There was nothing going on here in downtown Phoenix, and would scoot right back out again. But I would argue that light rail and ASU's presence in downtown Phoenix really are the catalysts for the revitalization that we see today in downtown. When we look at our university, their focus areas include research and innovation in biosciences and healthcare, two of the most significant areas of focus for economic development, job creation here in the city of Phoenix. In fact, we are currently number one across the country in square footage and capital investment in biosciences and healthcare. When we look at ASU and our city partnerships, we have had a deep, deep relationship. In the 2006 bond program, the citizens did vote and approve $223 million to advance our partnership with ASU. And just kind of a rough idea in front of you, you see the things that we worked on together. It was the Cronkite School of Journalism, the College of Nursing and Health Innovation, a remodernization of the original post office into the Student Union, the revisioning of Civic Space Park, and the Taylor Mall streetscape. But I think it's also important to note that we find other creative ways to partner with our universities outside of the bond program, and that included an investment from economic development of $13.5 million to get the Thunderbird School of Global Management built here in downtown Phoenix. $8.8 million for infrastructure at the ASU Health Solutions campus that is just to the east of Mayo along the 101. $12 million for the Buse Center for Law and Society out of our Downtown Reinvestment Fund. And then we do have an intergovernmental agreement for the lease of the Phoenix Bioscience Core land here in downtown. Wexford has just completed construction in partnership with Arizona State University, and the building is nearly full. When we look at ASU's proposal, you will recall in staff's original proposal, we had just over $5 million for the Advanced School of Nursing, and we had just over $5 million for a Biosciences and Healthcare and Microelectronics program, and that was for public infrastructure. As we discussed at our last meeting, Arizona State University had made those proposals to us, but in the time leading up to your first meeting, had really re-envisioned how they would alter their proposal to combine them into one request of the city during the bond. And what this program would do that they are moving forward in its scope of work is to look at an entirely new set of programs centered around public health technology, including advanced training and degreed programs, and the retraining of an existing workforce. It would help to advance discoveries in microelectronic-based solutions, really for the improvement of human health and application of discoveries in our healthcare ecosystem. The city investment that is being proposed would help with the public infrastructure and also with public building improvements for a total development of $75 to $130 million health technology center. As you will see on the next slide, Arizona State University is asking, let's see if I can get this to come up. It is really not happy with me on a Monday afternoon. The benefit would be for Phoenix would be that would be able to leverage other funds, state, federal, university, and philanthropic funds to help get the project built. I think it's important to note ASU is not asking the city of Phoenix for the $85 to $130 million, and you'll see in just a moment they have combined their request for the two programs we'd presented to you at your last meeting into a $15 million request. This would provide an opportunity for the city and ASU partnership to continue and focus as we have continued to focus over the last 8 years in semiconductor, biosciences, and healthcare sectors. And it would help to advance the pipeline in these advanced technology sectors and create that workforce that is in such demand today. The GEO bond request. I will apologize to this committee. I never have issues with a remote. I'm usually really good at this, and it is really struggling here today. When we look at the ASU project, what they were requesting out of the 2023 bond is partial funding covered under the existing scope of work. You'll remember as I opened it up, I said it had to be something that's covered under a scope of work or program. It is covered under the initial scope of work that we requested in advanced nursing and microelectronics. and would help to prioritize and create this advancement in the program. The partial funding would be beneficial to the project, and Arizona State University is seeking other funding sources to cover the remainder of the project. The project cost estimates did come directly from Arizona State University and the work that they've already completed in socializing this program. The project would be able to be completed within a 5-year period if the other funding sources are achieved, and ASU is actively working on those funding sources today. This project would require minimal city staff, services beyond the management of the initial subscription for the program. Now, I say that my department has a very close relationship with Arizona State University, and as we work together on their projects, my staff does work closely, but that's the normal course of their business, and the normal course of their action is to work in close partnership with ASU. This would not impact the ongoing city budget. As we look at our updated summary for your consideration, number one, the prioritized project remains the reimagined land acquisition for $23.5 million over the 5-year period of time, and that is still staff's recommendation in our prioritized project. In our future capital needs, Arizona Health Technology Center, which is updated to $15 million in 1 year, and that would remove or combine the 2 programs that we presented to you at your last meeting, which is the Advanced Nursing Facility, which was formerly the $5.7 million in 1 year, and we would remove or combine the Microelectronics Health and Sciences Technology Center, also of $5.7 million. The Economic Development Public Infrastructure, which staff had requested $5 million over a 5-year period of time, and the Spark Area Land Acquisition, which is additional land acquisition in the aviation land reuse area for $2.5 million over 5 years. Chairman, I would be happy to take any questions that you or the committee might have on our presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Do we have any questions?
Chairman, if you will indulge me, may we go back to the last slide and perhaps go a little deeper in a couple of these items?
Of course.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Ms. McRae, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm Jack Sokoloff. I've spent quite a bit of time looking at a number of these programs at ASU. I chaired the Health Futures Council at ASU for several years and became very familiar with a number of the excellent activities and programs that obviously are being suggested, amplified, and developed. I just wanted to understand a little more clearly, at a little greater level of detail, some of the things that are envisioned when we talk about the ASU Health Technology Center update and the specific advanced nursing facility. I would assume this is obviously because this is an essential need. We need more nurses of all types. We basically view that as integrative with other activities that are going on within the entire University of Arizona system. And for all intents and purposes, this meets a very significant need that we have in our community, both in emergency response and in, just quite frankly, staffing every healthcare institution that needs a nurse or a nurse practitioner. Is that a correct characterization of what's being asked for?
Chairman Reed, Committee Member Sokolov, I think that's a great characterization. I think I would add to it the fact that Arizona has been very successful, particularly Phoenix, over the last couple of years in attracting major microchip manufacturers in the market. And as we continue to move forward in human health, the chip manufacturers will play a significant role in advancing human health and advancing human health outcomes. Mm-hmm. So I think adding that to your comments about the advanced nursing, I think, are critical. I know Mayor Gallego will often say to me, the cure through cancer will come through Phoenix, and she truly believes that. And it is the marriage of those programs as they advance those critical industries and those critical healthcare outcomes that would play a role in that. And I would turn, Chairman, with your direction, just to make sure, I'll look at our colleagues here from Arizona State University and just make sure I captured those answers correctly. They're nodding their heads. I'm good.
Thank you. I was going to go to the microelectronics next for a quick moment, I don't know whether the committee is aware of all the enormous advances that have happened in essentially the microchip technology, the biomicrochip technology at ASU, and I think Mayor Gallego is correct. I think very well the cure for cancer, or at least the identification of the cure for cancer, very well may go through Phoenix based on the peptide array technology that literally has been created here. If one looks at the microelectronic aspect of all this, it really does synergize with the advanced nursing piece in the sense that immersive technology and the initiatives that ASU are beginning with immersive technology gives these professionals, whether they're doctors, nurses, pharmacists, other healthcare professionals, the ability to actually simulate real-life situations in a literally meta-universe. I spoke with the ASU people just a minute ago before this committee began, and they have communicated to me that in this particular vision, they anticipate using immersive technology as part of that microchip technology, as well as the objectives of looking at outcomes in relationship to the care for our population of Phoenix. Is that a correct statement to make?
Chairman Reed, Committee Member Sokolov, absolutely. And in fact, what you're talking about, I had the pleasure of touring just last week. We think of our healthcare mannequins as being the Recessa Annie. We all remember that, the one that we pumped on and breathed into to learn how to do CPR when we were lifeguards or when we had new children or in our jobs. They now have incredibly realistic mannequin simulators that house these microchips, that house these advanced technologies that can simulate surgery, that can simulate a child being born, and they can adjust it so that it's breech or that it is a struggling birth, or how they can adjust it. They can even make these mannequins so that they're sassy to their nurses, so that the nurses can learn how to deal with a patient who is seeing the worst of its life at that time. And so it is, I think these are really critical advances, and I really did with City Manager Barton, just had a chance to tour that lab last week and see those in actual action. So I think your comments are spot on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Reed, may I ask a question? Reed, Director Mackey, just more of a general question about process, and I'm looking at the prioritize versus future. Is there like a pot of money that is set aside for this subcommittee out of the $500 million? So in the sense of, if a future capital need project is bumped up to a prioritized project, is that in addition to the Rio Reimagined, or is the math reconfigured and something from Rio Reimagined is taken away to allocate for something that's bumped up?
Chairman Reed, Committee Member San Diego, I'll turn it over to Chris Fazio, our Deputy Director, to answer that question.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, committee members, we'll get into a bit of the agenda we'll be talking about here shortly, but to broadly address your comment, the subcommittee doesn't have a target. The subcommittee has identified prioritized capital needs. The executive committee as a whole has a $500 million number to work with. We know that going into this process, the results of the capital needs study in its entirety, these $647 million of projects were prioritized. So globally, this will have to be a cutting exercise. That doesn't mean that every subcommittee will be going down in funding. Some may be going up. This subcommittee may recommend more than what was identified or less. That's really at the subcommittee's discretion.
Thank you.
Sanders, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Mackey, first of all, thanks for the presentation. And technology did not get the best of you, so well done. You mentioned on the ASU presentation that there's going to be the combining of the three for the 15, and that would also bring with it some leverage dollars, correct? And maybe you talked about this. Perhaps can you tell us sort of what the estimate would be on those dollars that we could draw down, and perhaps what sources we're looking at for those dollars?
Chairman, Committee Member Sanders, I would like to bring up Arizona State University to answer that question for you, and they can speak directly to where they've identified those funding sources.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So again, to start, thank you to the committee and chairman for the opportunity to address you today, and thank you, Christine, for that excellent presentation. I'm Sally Morton, Executive Vice President of Knowledge Enterprise at ASU. In regards to your question, we anticipate that we will be gathering funds from many sources. One is the university itself, the state, philanthropic sources, as well as federal sources. There are many opportunities today on the federal front. And I would indicate that we've shown that we can do this in the past with respect, for example, to the Thunderbird building. So it's really a partnership. This is a catalyst, but we have every confidence that we will be able to raise the remaining funding.
Mr. Chairman, and do we have sort of an estimate what that multiplier might be if we were to draw it? I mean, I understand that we're still looking at this, and it's certainly not a done deal, so you can't have commitments. But if you were to think about how much we could leverage with this $15 million investment, around what are we thinking?
We are anticipating that the building would take somewhere between $75 million and $130 million to build. So that's somewhere between a 5 and 10-fold ROI from this investment.
Thank you.
Dr. Carter?
Thank you. And I'll stay on that point, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, and then move back to the question about, to follow up to that point to my co-chair, or my co-council member, Larry Santiago. So maybe this question is best for ASU as well, Chris, but if you can answer it, that'd be great too. So in terms of building this project, did you have a location in mind? Do you know where it's going to be built? Can we get a little more detail on the specifics of the project? And then a little additional information on the state funding. If it's within existing approved state funding, or would there be required a new ask of the state legislature to do capital investments? So those are the two questions related to the ASU project.
Chairman Reed, Vice Chair Carter, I can answer the first half, and then I'd like to ask ASU to come back up to answer the second half on their behalf. So as we look at the location, a location's not been identified yet. When you look at where we have partnerships with ASU, it is the Health Solutions campus up along the 101. It's here in downtown Phoenix. We have our West ASU campus, so we have a number of locations. The former Kmart building at I-17 and Northern, places that we're working together in partnerships. Right now, their request is listed as citywide, meaning they've not identified an exact location yet. I think that will be the next step as they move forward. But if ASU would come up and answer the question on the state funding, and then they can correct me if I misspoke on that.
Could you restate the question, please? I'm not sure I heard it come clearly. Your second question.
So the second question, you said when you were answering Todd's question about the sources of funds you would draw down, you said, and the state. Having been a former lawmaker, serving on appropriations for 6 years,
right.
Is it under what you already have been allocated, or would that be a new ask to the state legislature that would have to go through the appropriations process?
The former, and we are also part of the New Economy Initiative, right. Which is, we're just started our second year. We anticipate there will be further funding there. So I do not anticipate an additional ask to the state for this.
Not that there's a right or wrong answer, but good answer. And then a quick question, Chris, maybe this is for you, and ASU may want to add additional comments on it. So when you're looking at space in the city of Phoenix, and obviously you mentioned a number of different locations, can you speak a little bit about what is happening on the bioscience campus right now? Are they at capacity? Isn't there a lot of capacity available there? My question is, building something new when we're still trying to build out capacity in existing projects, more about the space, not necessarily the project.
Chairman Reed, Vice Chair Carter, my favorite bragging things are to brag about the biosciences efforts here in Phoenix, so you hit on my sweet spot. The two locations that I would think of along that front, let's start with the Phoenix Bioscience Core here in downtown Phoenix. It is a total of 30 acres, and we do have an intergovernmental agreement with University of Arizona on the south side of Fillmore and ASU on the north side of Fillmore. The Wexford, in partnership with Arizona State University, Wexford Science and Technology just completed a building on that campus, and it is now nearly 100% occupied. They finished middle of last year. They're 80% occupied or 75% occupied. And there is ample room to grow. So the ultimate build out of the PBC is planned to be 6.9 million square feet. And we're only about half built out today. So there are other parking lots that exist on the site. So people may look at it and say, it just looks like there's maybe 6 acres of dirt. How do you double your size? There's parking lots. There's all kinds of things that allow us to continue to grow on the PBC. So there is ample room in building it in an urban environment, which will be multi-stories that would be able to be built there. If we look at Discovery Oasis and Arizona State University's partnership with Mayo out along the 101 64th Street to 56th Street in that particular area. ASU completed a year ago their Health Solutions Center, and they do still have room to build on that initial 25 acres, but Mayo also did recently acquire, through a state land auction process, 228 additional acres that surround them. So from a built-out standpoint, at either of those locations that they would select, there is ample room to grow. If you look at ASU West, they have an entire area between 43rd Avenue and their campus where there's ample room to build.
So on that same note, in terms of, right now it's in the future capital needs project, so a little bit of logistics regarding this request. So it would remain in the future capital needs project, but if it ever bumped up to the prioritized project list, would the build be done in that 5 years? Is that the plan if it bumped up, or is that something that would then extend beyond the 5 years of the bond?
Chairman Reed, Vice Chair Carter, if that's up to the committee and where you move it forward to the executive committee and ultimately to the council. So if you were to prioritize it and move it up to a priority project, then it would go to the executive. You would rate it at one of your upcoming meetings. You would rank them in order. That would go to the executive committee. The executive committee then ranks all of the groups together. Then it moves on to the city council for their final conversation on the order and what goes out to the citizens for their consideration in November of 2023. When you look at that, Arizona State University and our conversations with them have assured us that they would, that difference as was discussed with you, that 85 to 130 million, they would be able to secure that and build within the 5-year period of time, should this committee move that one forward.
And on that same note, and perhaps this is a question for ASU as well, can you talk about how this would intersect with the other work in the space, specifically in the health sciences with the other universities, rather than building something that is more collaborative rather than just one standalone? Like how would it work together with the other universities? Because we don't see the other universities' request here as well.
Chairman Reed, Vice Chair Carter, I'd like to turn that over to ASU to answer. Thank you.
I see ample opportunity for collaboration with both University of Arizona and Northern Arizona University in this context. We often do projects with the other universities. I think what is envisioned here is at the forefront of health sciences, as Jack was so kind to point out in his remarks. And we don't do that alone. Each university has its own strengths. I mean, we have the largest engineering school, microelectronics. University of Arizona has its medical school, and Northern Arizona University doing incredible training of health technology and the health workforce. So I see ample opportunity for collaboration in this building and in the work that goes on there.
So to that point, Chris, maybe you can answer this. Were there other projects brought forth by other universities as well, or was this the only, like how did this make this particular list compared to like something that was more like maybe from ABOR? No pressure, Larry, to answer that.
Chairman Reed, Vice Chair Carter, Arizona State University was the only university that submitted a formal request prior to the issuance of the information from our bond committee. I do know that University of Arizona is moving forward with some concepts around their CAMI program, their Center for advanced advanced
molecular.
Thank you. Immunology. So I know that they're moving forward. I think they're working on their other funding sources right now and chose not to submit a formal request at this time to the city in that front.
May I ask one question, then I'm done?
Of course.
So there was thank you. I don't think this will be to ASU. I think this will be to the team here. So when looking at adding up to the $500 million amount for the bond, if you look at all the other subcommittees, do the other subcommittees prioritize projects equal 500? So if we do change something, even though you said it is still up to the executive committee, technically we're working at a zero-sum game because everything already equals 500.
Mr. Chair, committee members, our starting point right now is above $500 million. All subcommittees are in different portions of their recommendation process. We have some subcommittees that have said we're not going to recommend anything above the prioritized amount. We've had some subcommittees that are exploring the concept of saying if we were to make a pro rata cut to our prioritized needs equivalent to the $500 million relative to the $647 million prioritized needs, what would that look like? And we've had some subcommittees that may be heading down the path of recommending more than the prioritized needs. Any of those approaches are kind of acceptable in terms of how the program development would work.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I make just one observation quickly? In relationship to the follow-up related to the funding, one of the things that often happens, at least in my experience, is that some of these programs that are a little bit more innovative and perhaps nearer term oftentimes are synergized by the private sector and other governmental programs. The city of Phoenix was kind enough to provide $15 million in new market tax credits for Phoenix Children's Hospital. And I would assume that as we look at some of these projects, if they are in underserved areas and they basically have essential needs consistent with what we're talking about in terms of these requirements, you might use some of these funds as a seed to then take advantage of the 20% benefit of the new market tax credits. So if you were looking at essentially a $135 million project, there's a potential of another $25 million of new market tax credits that could be potentially applied to these types of projects in underserved areas if approached in an organized and coordinated way, not dissimilar to what we did with Phoenix Children's. Thank you.
And Chris, so as it relates to both the prioritized project as well as the 3 future capital needs projects, are these amounts inclusive of any operational or holding costs associated with it, or do they exist with each of these?
Chairman, as you look at those costs in relation to land acquisition, or you look at them in the realm of infrastructure, or you look at them with Arizona State University, the items that would be before my department, which would be land acquisition and then infrastructure in partnership with our sister departments, there are not really any holding costs for those. We do have funding that exists in our budget to be able to maintain the land sites that are owned by each department, and so my department would have the funding source available to do maintenance and keeping it clean and keeping it secure while we took it out for a request for proposal to bring future development forward. We also do have a funding source that within our operational budget, as we would do studies as to what it should be and doing kind of a scope of work and getting things ready. That exists in our consulting budget today. And so we prioritize those as economic development. We prioritize those with the city council each and every year. In fact, we'll be doing that at our September Economic Development and Equity Subcommittee meeting, prioritizing council's goals on that. Chairman, if I might, to Vice Chair Carter and to Committee Member Sokolov, if I could just provide a point of clarification on 2 of the items that came up there. So as we look at, and I was asked where the other universities were, and then also looking at new markets and other things. When we look at University of Arizona's proposal in the Center for Advanced Molecular Immunology, got it right. When we look at that front, they are looking at other revenue sources as well. So I believe you may receive a letter from them. You may be receiving information from them in the near future. But we are working with them, looking at other funding sources. Committee Member Sokolov, to your point, we have the Industrial Development Authority. We have new market tax credits. We have other programs that we do partner with our significant projects to be able to provide alternative funding sources to these programs as they move forward to ensure that they do benefit, particularly those that are in our underserved areas, like our great Phoenix Children's Hospital that partnered with us to be able to move that forward and do an incredible expansion to benefit our children.
That's wonderful to know, because that's a real kicker that oftentimes municipalities don't take advantage of. Thank you.
Do we have any additional questions? Yes.
Yeah. Director Mackey, just a point of clarification. You talk about partial funding in the second slide. My sense is that most of our projects that have been submitted have been for full funding. Is that correct, or do we have quite a few that are also like ASUs for partial funding?
Chairman Reed, Committee Member Sprout, that's a great question. So I'm a girl that can spend as much money as you'll give her. And I grew up in a time where don't give a girl diamonds, give her real estate. And so it is, as we look moving forward, we would make whatever projects for the funding that we receive move forward. So we talk about partial funding if it were to be for land acquisition. If we knew we had $23.5 million, we would do one of two things. We would strategically leverage that property to be able to acquire parcels that would put the city at the table as other properties made decisions, and so we would have an influential position on a larger parcel because we held the smaller parcel. When you look at infrastructure, $5 million doesn't get you a lot of infrastructure these days, but we would use it to be strategic on where we're doing other projects so you get the greatest bounce for your buck in being able to move those projects forward. I think at our first meeting I mentioned a few ones that had a monumental difference to small businesses, whether it was in construction of a fire hydrant, whether it was construction of a small water line. So $1 million a year wouldn't get you miles and miles of street, but it would get you those key components of infrastructure to leverage to move a project forward. So the funding that we're requesting in the categories, whether it was the RIO or whether it's in land acquisition, those would be full funding for us in all of those categories. In other words, we don't have other funding sources to bring forward to be able to leverage them, but we would use them strategically to be able to put us at the table or to add key infrastructure in areas, or as we call it, a there but for. There but for this would happen.
Thank you.
Director Mackey, a question about completion. The Vice Chair brought this up. And for a complicated project like this, and I'm sure many others, the definition of completion could be, maybe you're imagining a ribbon cutting and people are actually in the building. However, for something like this, it's going to take a while to get additional funding together and everything that's affiliated with a new building. Once you've got a shovel in the ground, so to speak, the project is complete in terms of obligating the money. You've now committed that money. People expect to be paid for building that building, et cetera, et cetera. So the definition of completion might be a deal having been made to move forward with the project. Would that make sense, as opposed to actually entering the building and it's finished?
Chairman Reed, Committee Member Ryder, that's exactly as I see completed, is the funding has been allocated, it's out through contracts, and it is moving forward in the project. I would argue that public infrastructure is much the same as we would talk about that building. Money that we would receive in the last year, as you saw our first slides from last time, we had $1 million each year. So funding we received in the last year would just go through a public process. It would go through the qualified vendors list. It would get something moving forward, but would most likely not be completed. Public infrastructure can be a year or two or three to complete. Thank you for that clarification.
Just quickly check in, Mr. Chairman, with you, Ms. Fazio. Is that how you would see it as well? Would you concur with that definition of complete?
Mr. Chair, committee members, when we look at bond funds, it's important that we expend the funding within a reasonable time period of having sold the bonds. So from that perspective, it wouldn't be terribly concerning to be obligating in year 5 and expending in year 6. it would be more concerning to be obligating or having a conceptual partnership in year 5 for something that may not actually be moving dirt until 5 years after that. So I would agree with the response, just with the caveat that the actual delivery would have to be shortly after.
We have additional questions? Okay. We will now open our public comment period regarding this item. We have 8 speakers registered today, including 6 virtual speakers wishing to speak. I will give each speaker 2 minutes. We will start with virtual participants. When your name is called, your audio device will be unmuted, and you may begin your remarks. At the conclusion of the virtual speakers, we will invite in-person attendees to the podium to address the committee. I will now ask the City Attorney to explain the rule of public comment in General Obligation Bond Committee meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee. Members of the public may speak to comment on the General Obligation Bond Program. The City Code requires speakers to present their comments in a respectful and courteous manner. Profane language, threats, or personal attacks on members of the public, council members, committee members, or staff are not allowed. A person who violates these rules will lose the opportunity to continue to speak. The committee and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending claims or litigation.
Thank you. I will now ask the staff to call off the speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first speaker is Chris Camacho, followed by Nikhil Dave. Chris, are you on the line?
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you may proceed.
Great, thank you. First of all, thanks for the consideration for this bond committee and the thorough process that each of you are going through to reconcile the priorities of the community. I wanted to call in today to share my support for the Arizona State University piece and the city's alignment around the $15 million bond funds. As the director, Christine Mackey, had referenced, we've made major strides in not only downtown, but the entire region's nexus of semiconductor and advanced electronics capacity, along with our healthcare growth and outcomes in terms of bringing high-wage jobs and diversifying our economic base. And programs like this not only advance training capacity in a much-needed healthcare sector, but they also, in a very pointed way, drive technology-focused health and bioscience outcomes for our region. One of the observations that I've seen as a leader in economic development is how important these public-private partnerships are, and even stackable levels of capital between the federal level, state, city, and private sector can be. And this dates back to bond measures in 2006 and well before that, where we've put intentional resources in play that have advanced the region's economic disposition around advancing technologies. And so our goal at GPAC and with the City of Phoenix and other partners in the Valley is to continue to drive these innovation-centered investments that meet desired STEM outcomes in terms of the workforce, but also position the market as industries shift and modernize. And so with that, I just wanted to call in and give a few sentiments of support for your evaluation of the ASU bond package component, and I'm elated to have the opportunity to speak on ASU's behalf, as I've seen this university really propel the greater Phoenix region in one of the top innovation-centered markets in the country. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Nikhil Dave, followed by Cindy Gahn. Nikhil, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee members for having me here today. It is nice to see some familiar faces as well as some new faces. My name is Nikhil Dave, and I am here to speak in support of prioritizing ASU's $15 million education and research project for this bond election as well. I want to quickly note that I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and my views are distinct from those of the company that I work for. I have engaged closely with ASU's bioscience innovation ecosystem for over a third of my life. I started working at ASU in a research lab studying Alzheimer's disease at 14 in high school, and several years later received my master's in biology and undergraduate degree in neuroscience there. And along with that, during my many years at ASU, I won a $1 million International Innovation Prize with an ASU team, published papers, produced patents, and even served a 2-year term on the Arizona Board of Regents, where I served specifically on the Committee for Research and Health Sciences. And all of this work and all this engagement with ASU's bioscience ecosystem helped prepare me for my job today as I work as a business analyst at McKinsey & Company, advising some of the world's most influential businesses and governments on economic growth strategy. And so with all this, I have a really unique perspective in that as a former student, I see the trees, and as a former regent and a McKinsey consultant, I see the forest, so to speak. And with this unique perspective, it's obvious to me that in order to remain competitive and continue to see the positive economic growth that Phoenix has experienced over the last decade, Phoenix must continue to invest in projects and partnerships like this. Not only does this work prepare future workforce, but it also allows Arizona to continue thriving as an innovation ecosystem. And these partnerships with ASU are the core, as was mentioned before, of much of Arizona's private and public sector growth that we've seen in the last several decades. And so it's, in my view, very time sensitive, and it's of course obviously very high ROI to prioritize this, as projects like this attract international industry partners and make Phoenix far more competitive for federal funding.
Our next speaker is Cindy Gahn, followed by Dan Penton. Cindy, are you on the line?
I am.
You may
Good
proceed.
afternoon, Mr. Chair. Oh, hi. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Cindy Gahn. I am the Senior Director of Phoenix Community Alliance, PCA. And I speak today on behalf of our Board of Directors and members in support of the GEO bond funding for ASU Health Technology Center project. Both the Phoenix Community Alliance Education and Public Affairs Committees ask for your support for the full funding for this project to develop the facilities. And advancing this project for the GEO bond funding is good business because it helps leverage other funding sources. By moving this project from the future capital needs to the prioritized capital needs list recommended for funding, you will ensure that ever increasing growth needs of Phoenix's medical and healthcare and health tech workforce can be met sooner rather than later. This co-investment in public infrastructure by the city will bring this project to fruition. In addition, PCA's Arts, Culture, and Public Life Committee applauds the inclusion of 1% of the project cost for the arts. We respectfully request that you recommend this project for full funding as a prioritized capital needs project. And I thank you for your time and consideration.
Our next speaker is Dan Penton, followed by Amy Wolf. Dan, are you on the line? Dan is not on the line. Our next speaker is Amy Wolf, followed by Chris Anderson. Amy, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you for having me. I am Amy Wolf, Director of Clinical Operations for Safe Health Systems, which is a medtech company focused on digital diagnostics. We are a company that offers platform solutions for rapid deployment of specialized population health applications that reduce costs and improve outcomes at scale. And I'm here to offer our support of ASU's proposed Health, Science and Technology Center. Personally, I am the former administrator of the Mayo Clinic side of the Mayo Clinic and ASU Alliance for Healthcare, and have partnered and worked with ASU for several years and seen firsthand the impact of city investment in health-related projects such as the ASU Health Futures Center adjacent to the Mayo Clinic in North Phoenix. Safe Health Systems is an alumni company of the Mayo Clinic and ASU Alliance for Healthcare MedTech Accelerator, having participated in the program in 2019. Through the program, our company has been afforded many opportunities to benefit from the local ecosystem of startups and innovators within the Valley. In fact, in 2021, we moved our headquarters from Santa Monica, California, to Arizona so that we could benefit from the business-friendly nature of the state and continue to grow our relationship with partners such as the Mayo Clinic and Arizona State University. In fact, during the pandemic, we worked closely with ASU on their Health Check app, and together we grew an effective response to managing the pandemic for the ASU community. We continue to focus on COVID-19 diagnosis, treatment, and reporting, and we look forward to partnering with more local companies in Arizona in their response to COVID-19 and other health issues. Innovators and local startups need access to the workforce talent created by the ASU Educational Enterprise and the infrastructure that the ASU Health Science and Technology Center would offer. So we would ask that the committee prioritize projects such as the center as a way to support the growing innovation sector in Phoenix.
Our next speaker is Chris Anderson, followed by Dr. Sally Morton in Upper Council Chambers. Chris, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, and thank you, Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Chris Anderson. I'm the Senior Managing Director for Hines. We're an international real estate development firm here in Phoenix, Arizona that has been investing in the Phoenix marketplace since 1998 and have well over several $1 billion of investments in this market. I'm also a board member for University Realty at ASU, although I'm not speaking on behalf of that board at this time. I just wanted to offer our support.
Mr. Anderson, are you still online? We cannot hear you. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, please
Can you
proceed.
hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry. I apologize. I just wanted to offer our support for this GeoBond for this center here, and that continue to support ASU and their efforts in this area, so that we can continue to.
You've disconnected again. Hello? Mr. Chair, if it's okay, we'll go to our next speaker, and if Mr. Anderson stays online, we can try again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our next speaker in Upper Council Chambers is Dr. Sally Morton.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a thank you to Mr. Chairman, the members of the subcommittee, as well as staff for the robust discussion today. Thank you. I'm also delighted to announce that today U.S. News & World Report again denoted ASU as #1 in innovation among universities in the United States for the 8th year in a row. And projects like this are a prime example of that innovation in partnership with the City of Phoenix. This project is a synergistic example of combining both education as well as economic development, training the workforce, the next workforce, to tackle the healthcare needs that we have in the region and beyond, as well as having a positive impact on the city in terms of the economy. And I just wanted to cite some of the outcomes of the Rounds Consulting firm's assessment of the economic impact that this project would have on the city. Within 10 years, we anticipate close to 5,000 high-wage jobs, a labor income of $316 million, and an economic output of $864 million by the 10th year. Also, in terms of new taxes, in the first years, we anticipate over $90 million in new state taxes, $18.5 million in new county taxes, and $19.2 million in new city taxes during the first 10 years. So thank you again for consideration of this project.
Our next speaker is David Kreider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I know the pay is awful thin for the work that you're doing, but it is really important for the city of Phoenix. I am the Executive Director of the Phoenix Bioscience Corps, reporting to the Enterprise Executive Committee of the Board of Regents, which is constituted of the 3 university presidents in Arizona. I'd like to make 3 points and keep them very simple. Aligning educational initiatives with strong economic development demand, especially when the focus is on health, technology, and innovation, is extremely powerful. And when you're aligning those two elements with an entity like Arizona State University that values and focuses on who they include and not who they exclude is also extremely powerful and really bodes well for people that are interested in the city of Phoenix. Number two is leverage.